Many college students are worried about climate change, and they want their universities to be part of the solution. Many of these pristine universities talk a lot about sustainability, but at the same time, they are profiting from what's going on out here, drilling for oil and gas, a primary driver of climate change. At the University of Texas at Austin, and all colleges, operating a huge campus creates carbon emissions. UT has been shrinking those emissions, and when it comes to sustainability, it calls itself a national leader. Ella Hammersley is a senior, she's a music student, and a climate activist.
I still want to give credit to the university for taking action on reducing emissions on campus, but that's only a small part of the picture.
Hundreds of miles from the Austin campus in the oil fields of West Texas, the UT system owns more than 3,000 square miles of property, larger than some small states. Energy companies lease the university lands, extract oil and gas, and pay royalties to the university system. UT is really focused on cutting its carbon emissions on the Austin campus, where they generated an estimated 1.6 million metric tons of carbon over 5 years. We worked with an energy expert who calculated for the first time the carbon footprint from burning the oil drilled from its West Texas property. That number is 32.6 million metric tons over the same period, the equivalent of 20 more UT campuses.
Do you think UT can talk about its leadership on sustainability while at the same time having all these emissions related to the oil that is being pumped in West Texas?
Well, it does. UT has a sustainability symposium every year. We have a sustainability master plan. All of these things are going on while at the same time, billions of dollars are being invested into oil and gas. So that's currently what the university is doing.
Oil revenue is the biggest reason UT is the richest public university system in America, with an endowment of $42.7 billion. Number 2 is the Texas A&M system with $18.2 billion. It also gets a cut of the oil royalties from university properties in West Texas. Primarily, the money is used for campus construction projects across the state. Less than 1% goes toward financial aid.
Does the University of Texas have a conflict of interest here?
They do, because they are profiting off of fossil fuels.
Dr. Michael Mann is a climatologist at the University of Pennsylvania. He says if the world hopes to limit the worst effects of climate change, that means stop drilling for new oil.
What more influential message would it send if the flagship university of one of our most fossil fuel-driven states, Texas, were to take true leadership when it comes to the clean energy transition?
The Texas University system, which declined our interview request, provided a statement that says its property is a strategic national resource that would be tapped regardless of ownership, and that royalties have positively impacted millions of people who have benefited from historic investments in financial aid, faculty support, teaching, research, medical buildings, and more. While new wells are being drilled all the time, the university does also lease land for wind and solar farms. Those projects account for less than 1% of its revenue.
That little sliver has to become the full thing. It has to become 100%. And they need to move dramatically away from using that land to worsen the climate crisis, to using that land to make a profit in helping lead us down this path of clean energy.
A university doesn't have to own its own oil fields to benefit from the fossil fuel industry.
So I think that's actually a more sustainable way to build a stronger base.
At Stanford, June Choi is a PhD student who came to study climate change.
The school is called the Doerr School of Sustainability. It says its objective is to address the most critical challenges of the 21st century, which is the climate crisis. But then to go ahead and say that we're going to do this work by accepting funding and collaborating with fossil fuel industry partners is a total contradiction.
Fossil fuels out the door! Big oil no more!
In response, Choi and other students and faculty protested last year's ribbon-cutting celebration at Stanford's $1.7 billion climate school.
We were kind of crashing the party, really, and there was just so much energy. So it created a lot of excitement.
Stanford, between 2010 and 2020, accepted $56.6 million in donations from oil and gas companies. That's according to research by the progressive think tank Data for Progress. That puts Stanford in the top 10 of universities accepting fossil fuel donations.
How does the taking of funds at Stanford help the oil companies?
You're purchasing the name Stanford University, and that is worth a lot to a fossil fuel industry that's trying to purchase credibility. Hey, look, we're trying to solve the problem, and we're working with the greatest universities around to do so.
What the protesters want is a university ban on those donations. Last year, Princeton became the first and only university to take that step. It created a list of 90 fossil fuel companies it will not accept donations from. In a process called dissociation, Princeton targeted companies involved what Princeton says are the most polluting segments of the industry and had a history of spreading corporate disinformation about climate change. The biggest name on the list is Exxon, which says it had donated $12 million to Princeton. In a statement, Exxon writes, "Close collaboration between industry and academia is essential to finding practical solutions to climate change."
What's great about what Princeton did is that it also has a process for reassociation with companies that can later show that they've met certain criteria. And that's great because then the university is really in a position to say, look, like we are really constructively engaging with these companies and contributing to shifting the needle on their actions.
Student organizing at Stanford is beginning to pay off. The university, which declined our request for an interview, recently formed a committee to review fossil fuel funding of research.
It's a very positive sign because that is exactly the beginning of a transparent process that we've been asking for.
And there are other ways that universities can change.
So we're going to put it in the tank.
Rutgers, the largest state university system in New Jersey, has a long history of studying climate change using a fleet of underwater gliders.
One of you, if you guys want to help me secure it, make sure the wings.
Here I am lifting like I'm actually helping. I'm just holding on to it. I got it.
President Jonathan Holloway and I are learning how scientists calibrate those gliders for ocean voyages.
Is that just floating right now?
Yep.
Rutgers, like most large universities, invests money in the stock market. After years of pressure from students and faculty, Rutgers announced in 2021 that it would permanently sell off all of its fossil fuel investments.
I think you're seeing increasingly universities becoming uncomfortable trying to pursue revenue streams in these industries that they know are punishing the earth.
Of the 10 largest endowments in America, 6 universities have fully exited their investments: Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Princeton, MIT, and Michigan. 1 has partially exited, Penn, and 3 maintain their fossil fuel investments: Notre Dame, Texas, and Texas A&M.
So it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
Why is it worth the effort that it takes to organize this whole university around this one initiative?
It's a lot of work. The reason it's worth it, we only got one planet. And if we don't do this work for the future that we're not going to see, the one thing we know is the future will be worse. We know that. So if we know that, don't we have an obligation to do something about it? I think we do.
So do students of today, like Ella and June, who will inherit the planet tomorrow. I'm David Schechter, on the dot.